Scary Sushi. Yes, I'm doing this game. A Roblox, not really horror game, where you'll have to go put yourself in danger, collect ingredients, cook food, and try to survive. Very recently, in my spare time, I've actually been playing Scary Sushi a lot, and so recently, I really wanted to talk about the game. Not anything specific, like a specific mechanic, but rather just the game in general, such as the storyline, the chapters, survival mode, etc., etc. Now, something you probably noticed is that I'm using other content creators' footage. That's because the combination between school and lag has kind of prevented me from being able to record my own footage for it. But regardless, I hope you join me on this journey and especially enjoyed this video. So Scary Sushi starts out with us meeting Hiroshi Kimura, the creator of Moonlight Sushi. The player is there with the goal of being a covenant chef at the restaurant. The thing though is that Moonlight Sushi only takes in the best chefs in the world, and so all of chapter 1 is basically you going through the interview trying to prove that you are a good chef. In order to prove yourself, you'll need to go through 4 courses of multiple different dishes. You'll be given a specific amount of dishes that you'll need to make in a specific amount of time. Failure to do so will result in your extermination. Not termination, extermination. All of course 1 focuses on the bases of sushi, and by that I mean seaweed and rice. Before starting your first course, however, Hiroshi mentions that the janitor has been feeling a bit sick, so it's probably best that you avoid him at all costs. Gameplay wise, the first course isn't really that complicated. Just don't run into the janitor, collect the ingredients, and then cook them. It's fairly simple, yet I think it's good because of that. Chances are people who are playing Chapter 1 probably haven't ever played Scary Sushi before, so making the first course very complicated would just make the experience very unfun. Additionally, it's the first course. It's not like we're dealing with the final course of the entire game. We can't expect anything too complicated, otherwise the player would simply just be overwhelmed. After completing the first course, Hiroshi congratulates you for doing it before you're interrupted. The people interrupting your game? The Night Keepers. They try to explain to the player that they're not safe. However, before they can explain in enough details, they lose connection and the game is brought back to normal. Now we move on to course 2, where we're going to have to start incorporating fish into our meals. One minor detail though is that the location is currently under renovation, so it's probably best to just not touch the water. Now, course 2 doesn't really add much to the entire gameplay, but that doesn't mean it doesn't add anything. In order to get access to the fish that you'll need to get for the second course, you'll need to do a sort of mini obby, where you'll have to do it platforms that will occasionally dunk down into the water. This can easily be avoided simply by standing on the platforms when they turn away, but as soon as they turn red, to immediately get off them. After completing the second course, once again the game is interrupted by the Night Keepers. They explain that Hiroshi is selling something mutant, and that we need to leave as soon as possible, but once again, their connection is cut off. Ignoring that, Hiroshi does congratulate us on completing our second course. Now, we move on to course 3, where we're going to now incorporate vegetables. In a garden, there's 4 buildings that put 4 different types of vegetables, being carrots, avocados, cucumbers, and radishes, into a cycle to ensure that they're the highest qualities they can physically be. However, before you start the third course, you are alerted of 2 separate things. First off, some of the pipes within the restaurant have started to leak a black sludge-like substance. You'll need to avoid stepping into them, as they can easily slow you down and make the janitor a much bigger threat. Additionally, in one of the 4 buildings, specifically the one that contained the radishes, there is a monster within there that likes radishes a bit too much, so you'll also need to avoid it. Honestly, I like the leaky pipes in the third course. It makes the janitor a much bigger threat than he was in the previous courses. However, I can't really say the same for the radish monster. Look, I'm not going to even try pronouncing its name. You see, after a specific amount of time, all of the vegetables will rotate into a different room, which means that the monster won't always stay in the same room. However, on hard mode, it becomes way more difficult to manage where the monster is, to the point where it's more likely that you just need to gamble. Thankfully though, if you see the monster, then it will simply just release a green gas, so you'll need to get far away from it as possible. If you fail to do so, then you'll die, instead of just immediately dying if you fail to open the right door. That doesn't mean I hate the radish monster, however. I I do like the concept of it, I just don't like how it was executed. But regardless, that's the third course. Now you have one final course to go, which in this time, you'll need to incorporate the restaurant's special ingredient. Meanwhile, the Night Keepers have been able to access the Moonlight Sushi system, and they're currently working on a way to help you escape the location, and all they need from you is just to survive. But back to the secret ingredient, they actually have their own machine to actually produce it, and all they ask of you is simply just to avoid their security team, which is a bunch of flies. The fourth course is simple. Go into the area where they keep all the special ingredients, avoid being seen by the flies, and slowly make your way to the machine. When comparing it to the sort of linear difficulty increase that we saw with the 3 previous courses, Course 4 is just very disappointing. But there's not really much to add, just avoid the flies, get the secret ingredient, and make the dishes, and then you've completed the 4th course. Some good news is that the Night Keepers were successful in helping you get an escape route. All you'll need to do is simply go to the elevator, which just so happens to be in the same location as the secret ingredients. Moving past that, Hiroshi does congratulate us on completing all 4 courses, leading us to finding out what dessert is going to be, which it just so happens to be us. Now at this point, you'll have to do a sort of chase sequence where you'll simply have to avoid being killed from all of the monsters that you've had to deal with from the previous 4 courses. It's not really that hard, the only dangerous part is actually the slop that's going to be on the floor, as soon after avoiding that, you're going to be seeing the radish monster, and you can easily die to it as a result. After escaping to the elevator, you're eventually given the lore drop by Hiroshi about why all this is happening and the origins of Moonlight Sushi. You see, Moonlight Sushi was actually renowned as the best sushi place in the world for about 15 years. However, as time went on, they weren't able to keep that same creativity, which ended up leading to a fusion restaurant actually gaining the reward instead. As a result, Hiroshi set out to find a new ingredient, an ingredient so new and rare to the point where no one could be able to copy him. Eventually, he found a fish in the deepest part of the ocean. Thankfully for Hiroshi, that fish in specific tends to produce a lot of eggs that just so happen to also be their secret ingredient. Supposedly, the eggs can actually produce a similar taste as to the person's favorite type of food. So like for example, if your favorite food is something random, I'll just say Taco Bell, and the eggs will actually mimic the taste of Taco Bell. However, it does have the side effects of churning the person into a sort of goop monster. Finally, Hiroshi states that the fish isn't even from their own realm. Instead, it's from a completely separate dimension referred to as the Void. However, we're not able to see it, as he's coming to personally kill us. Thankfully for us though, the Night Keepers are back, and they've taken control of the portal. They're starting up the portal, and now all we need to do is simply do a quick, fast-paced obby to get to the portal, and not die to the spider. And after a quick obby, we jump into the portal, and are now sent to the Void. We start off Chapter 2 into the Void, where we meet a giant goop monster, referred to as Kyoku. And thanks to Hiroshi, he's actually discovered sushi, which is actually a coincidence for us. You see, Kyoku actually has a task for us. We're basically going to become his personal chef, and our job is to go to multiple different dimensions, grab ingredients, come back to the Void, and cook him sushi. He starts off by sending us into a dimension referred to as the Ruin, and thus our first course begins. Now the first course of Chapter 2 isn't really that complicated, which makes sense. As it's the first course, it doesn't really need to be that complicated. As I've stated before, it will just overwhelm the player otherwise. To deal with the monster in the ruins, you simply just need to stop moving when he comes above you, as he'll shine a light, and if you move in that light, you die. Like Chapter 1's first course, it's not that hard, which is reasonable enough, so let's just move on to the second course. For the second course, you'll need to start incorporating insects into your dishes, specifically from the temple room. To be honest, I don't know how I should feel about the second course. I like the fact that it's a bit more difficult than the first one, however the way they increase the difficulty is a bit odd. Basically, there's a big bug that if it sees you, will immediately start chasing you with the goal of killing you. To avoid it, there's 2 spots in the entire map, both at the entrance and at the center, that are safe from the bug. To be honest, the only thing I dislike about this realm is simply the fact that the bugs that you'll need to collect will sporadically move into different locations, which makes collecting specific types of bugs, especially if you're in a time crunch, way more difficult. But regardless, there are still a few positives. I do like the designs of the bugs, and especially the monster. But regardless, that's the second course. For the third course, Yoku now craves fish. You'll need to start incorporating that as well. And fish specifically from a different dimension called the Deep. And to be totally honest, this is probably the worst course, not only in Chapter 2, but probably in the game in general in my opinion. Now don't get me wrong, the design of everything is very good and I think the realm itself looks absolutely stunning. But that's not my issue. My issue is with the swimming. You see, while swimming it actually becomes very difficult to rise or fall, which becomes a problem if you need to do things like collect clam or jellyfish. In fact, the most efficient way to sink or rise into the water is simply just by stop swimming entirely and then just moving up. Which is annoying and also a big problem in case you're trying to run away from the giant fish monster. Now you can simply ask the question of why does that matter so much? Why is that alone simply the reason why it's the worst course? And that's simply because when compared to every other course, which is okay, and in some cases actually pretty fun, you start to realize that compared to every other course, the Deep just doesn't perform as well. But that's the third course, let's move on to the fourth. Finally, for the fourth course, Yoku demands that you go into a place called the Jungles, where you'll need to find a specific type of creature. According to him, they have the most malicious eyes and he demands that you get them now, or face the worst death possible. Entering into the jungles, you're actually not greeted by a jungle, instead you're greeted by a giant screen. And who takes control? That's right, the Night Keepers. The Night Watchers apologize for sending you into the void, however they also state that you were the only one capable of actually getting close, let alone defeating Kyoku, and they give you an explanation. You see, the Night Keepers specifically deal with interdimensional beings. And it was up until they actually discovered the void that everything was actually going pretty well. At first, the Night Keepers actually used the void to keep some of their most dangerous anomalies trapped in there, as they were way too dangerous to be sent anywhere else. However, because of Kyoku's presence and influence, the anomalies eventually began to evolve and mutate, eventually turning into the anomalies that we had to deal with in both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Thankfully though, there is actually a special ingredient that can deal with Kyoku, but it's only found in a separate dimension altogether, referred to as the tunnels. And so, the Night Keepers decide to hack the portal that would originally send you to the jungles, and instead send you to the tunnel. To be brutally honest, Course 4 and the Tunnels dimension actually made up for Course 3, the Deep, and everything else, and more. Besides a few small areas, you're almost never given any space for room, which, considering as to how much progress you made into the game, definitely feels warranted for the final course. If I had to change anything though, I would simply just make the tunnels a bit shorter, as it makes stuff like speedrunning or hard mode a lot more difficult. But regardless, you get the ingredients, feed it to Kyoku, and eventually finish the final course of Chapter 2. After your final course, the special ingredient starts doing its job and actually starts breaking down Kyoku's physical body. Your goal now is simply just to escape the void, and the only way to do so is to go through each and every dimension that you had just previously gone to in order to make it for an escape. I really love this chase sequence. I love the fact that you're able to go into all 4 dimensions that you had previously gone to, the fact that you have to run away specifically from the 4 monsters that you had to deal with throughout this chapter, and the fact that you're almost never given time to breathe, with the exception of the beginning of the final chase sequence into the tunnels. After your escape, you're now falling back into the void, except you're now falling potentially into the headquarters of the Night Keepers. Simply just avoid the debris and make it to the tower. And finally, you've beaten Chapter 2. Let's start off with hard mode. In the lobby of the main game, you're actually able to select between playing on either normal mode or hard mode. The difference between the two is simple. Hard mode gives you an extra dish that you have to deal with, meaning you'll have to manage 2 dishes at the exact same time. But in return, whatever rewards you're ever given will be multiplied by 1.5. The rewards in specific are actually the game's currency, which can be used to buy customizable versions of your workplace. While Chapter 1 is relatively easy to do on hard mode, Chapter 2, on the other hand, isn't as kind, and at times doesn't even feel like it was made with hard mode in mind. But that's my opinion. Now, let's move on to survival mode, or endless mode if you want to be specific. Basically, survival mode gives you an infinite amount of dishes to complete and an infinite amount of time, so long as you're meeting the time requirement per each dish, and slowly the game will increase in difficulty. It starts out simple with the lights simply going out, but eventually leads to enemies start reacting a lot faster, you being less time to do certain things, like for example, get fish, as the platforms will move up and down very quickly, and additionally you also have to manage 2 dishes at the exact same time. The rewards from survival mode is simply just for surviving 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and an hour, and because of school and also me playing other games, I wasn't really able to play survival mode all that much. But I did give it a shot and actually did pretty good, being able to get all the way to 40 minutes. But anyways, that's Scary Sushi. What's the future for the game? I have no idea. Maybe they'll add more chapters, maybe this is the end. I have no idea. But I will definitely make a video in the future explaining how they could fix up the game in my opinion, because I do think there are some things that could be improved upon. But regardless, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys next week.